The rain was supposed to wash away her problems, not drown her in a world she never knew existed. When Imani Brooks slipped into that black sedan to escape the storm, she had no idea she was climbing into the car of Brooklyn's most feared Mafia boss, a man who hadn't touched a woman in 10 years. One bullet through the window would shatter more than just glass. It would break open a decade of grief, ignite a love that could destroy them both, and put her teenage sister directly in the crosshairs of a vengeful enemy. What started as a simple mistake would become a choice between the safety she'd always craved and the independence she'd fought to keep. But when someone decides that hurting innocent people is the perfect way to settle old scores, Imani will discover that sometimes the most dangerous place to be is in the arms of the man who would burn down the world to protect you. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this story is about to prove that getting into the wrong car can lead to all the right places. The rain drummed against the diner windows like tiny fingers tapping for attention. Imani Brooks wiped down the last table and counted the crumpled bills in her apron pocket. $18.43 in tips. Not bad for a Tuesday night, but not great either. She pulled out her phone and called Naya. "Hey, baby girl," she said, when her 16-year-old sister answered. "How are you breathing tonight?" "I'm okay." Naya's voice came through scratchy but steady. "Used my inhaler an hour ago. Did my homework too." "Good. I'll be home in about 30 minutes. Make sure you take your evening dose before bed." "I will. Love you, Manny." "Love you too." Imani hung up and gathered her things. The diner was empty except for old Mr. Peterson, nursing his third cup of coffee in the corner booth. Her manager, Rick, was already counting the register. "See you tomorrow, Rick," she called out. "Drive safe, Imani. Weather's getting nasty out there." The cold air hit her face as she pushed through the door. The rain had turned heavier, soaking through her thin jacket within seconds. She hurried toward the bus stop, her sneakers splashing through puddles that reflected the neon signs from the shops lining the street. A motorcycle roared past, its engine backfiring with a loud pop that made her jump. Her heart hammered as she pressed a hand to her chest and laughed at herself. Just a bike, nothing to worry about. That's when she saw the car. A sleek black sedan sat at the curb with its driver's door slightly open. The interior light cast a warm glow that looked incredibly inviting compared to the cold, wet night. Steam rose from her breath as she considered her options. The bus wouldn't come for another 15 minutes, and she was already soaked to the skin. Without thinking too much about it, she ducked toward the car and slipped into the back seat. The leather was soft and warm, and the rain stopped drumming against her immediately. "Ellery Street, please," she said, settling back and closing her eyes for just a moment. "Building 412. I know it's not far, but this rain is—" She opened her eyes and looked up at the rearview mirror. A pair of dark eyes stared back at her, not the tired eyes of a cab driver or rideshare worker. These eyes were sharp, alert, and definitely not expecting her. The man in the driver's seat had olive skin and black hair that was perfectly styled despite the late hour. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than she made in 3 months, and he was not her driver. She said, her mouth suddenly dry. "I think I made a mistake." The door locks clicked with a soft but definite sound. "You're in the wrong car," the man said. His voice was calm, controlled, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Before she could respond, another motorcycle pulled alongside them. This time, something cracked against the window next to her head. A spider web of lines appeared in the glass. "Get down," the man ordered. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders and pushed her down into the seat just as the car lurched forward. The engine roared to life and they shot down the street like a rocket. Imani's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "What's happening?" she gasped. "Who are you? What—" "Stay down." His voice cut through her panic like a knife. "We'll be safe in a moment." The car took a sharp right turn that pressed her against the door. Then another turn and another. Finally, they slowed down and rolled into what sounded like a garage. The engine cut off and heavy doors slammed shut behind them. Silence. Imani slowly sat up, her whole body shaking. The man turned around to look at her. His face was handsome in a way that made her think of old movies. Strong jaw, straight nose, dark eyes that seemed to see everything. But there was something else there too. Something cold and careful. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. He reached into the front seat and pulled out a long wool coat. Without asking, he draped it over her shoulders. It smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something that reminded her of safety, though she couldn't explain why. "My name is Luca," he said, "and I'm going to take you home." "That's not a request." Another man appeared at the car window, He was shorter than Luca, but built like he spent serious time at the gym. His eyes swept over the car, checking for damage. Marco, Luca said without looking away from her. Status. Clean exit. They didn't follow. Marco's voice was all business, but they definitely meant business. Luca nodded once. Get us to her building and call ahead. I want to know who's watching. Watching? Imani found her voice. What do you mean watching? I just got in the wrong car. This is some kind of mistake. Luca's eyes softened slightly, but not much. I wish it were that simple. Marco got into the front passenger seat, and they pulled out of the garage. Imani clutched the coat tighter around her shoulders and tried to make sense of what had just happened. 20 minutes ago, her biggest worry had been getting home before the rain soaked through her shoes. Now she was sitting in a stranger's expensive car, wearing his coat while someone had apparently shot at them. I need to call my sister, she said. Not yet, Luca replied. When we get you home safely, you can call whoever you want. You don't understand. She's only 16 and she has asthma. If she gets worried, she's safer not knowing about this right now. His tone was final, but not unkind. Trust me. Trust him? She didn't even know him, but something in his voice made her want to believe he was trying to help her, even if she didn't understand how sitting in his car had put her in danger in the first place. They drove through the familiar streets of her neighborhood in tense silence. When they pulled up in front of her building, Marco was out of the car before it had fully stopped. He walked to the corner and back, his eyes scanning the shadows like he was looking for something specific. 2 men, he reported when he returned, sitting in a blue Honda across the street. They've been there for at least an hour. Luca's jaw tightened. Since before she got off work. What are you talking about? Imani demanded. What men? I live here. These are my neighbors. Marco will check them out, Luca said. But we're not taking any chances. Marco walked toward the Honda with casual confidence. The car started up and drove away before he got within 20 feet of it. That's not normal neighborhood behavior, Luca said quietly. Imani's hand started shaking again. I don't understand any of this. I'm just a waitress. I work double shifts and take care of my sister. I don't have anything to do with whatever this is. I know. Luca's voice was gentler now. But you got into my car tonight. That changes things. They walked to her building together, Luca staying close enough to her side that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The building was old and tired-looking, with a broken light in the entryway and mail slots that didn't lock properly. After the luxury of his car, it felt even more run down than usual. On the third-floor landing, the overhead light flickered on and off like a strobe. But it wasn't the faulty wiring that made Luca stop in his tracks. It was the smell. Gas. The sharp, dangerous scent was coming from somewhere near her apartment door. Imani. His voice was deadly serious. Do you smell that? She inhaled, and her blood turned to ice. That's not normal. The stove is electric and we don't have a gas line. Luca was already pulling out his phone. Marco, building evacuation, now. What's happening? Imani's voice rose with panic. Luca put his hands on her shoulders and looked directly into her eyes. You and your sister aren't sleeping here tonight. That's not a discussion. The way he said it, calm but absolutely certain, told her that arguing would be useless. And honestly, with that gas smell getting stronger by the second, she didn't want to argue. Nia, she whispered. We'll get her, Luca said. Right now. They climbed to the 4th floor, where Imani's apartment key felt slippery in her shaking hands. When the door opened, Nia looked up from her homework at the kitchen table. Her inhaler sat next to her textbook, and her breathing was calm and steady. Mani, you're early. And who's... She stopped talking when she saw Luca behind her sister. Pack a bag, Imani said, trying to keep her voice calm. We're staying somewhere else tonight. Why? What's wrong? Imani looked at Luca, who nodded slightly. There's a gas leak downstairs. It's not safe. It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Nia was smart, though. Her eyes moved between her sister and the stranger in the expensive suit. How long? She asked quietly. I don't know yet, Imani admitted. Just pack for a few days. Grab your inhaler and your meds. While Nia gathered her things, Luca stood in the doorway like a sentinel. His eyes never stopped moving, checking the windows, listening to every sound from the hallway. Something about his presence made the small apartment feel safer, even in the middle of whatever this crisis was. Ready? Nia announced, shouldering a backpack. They made their way back downstairs quickly and quietly. Marco was waiting by the car with the engine already running. During the drive, Nia peppered Luca with questions that he answered patiently but vaguely. Yes, They would be safe where they were going. No, she didn't need to worry about school tomorrow. Yes, someone would check on their apartment. When they pulled up in front of a brownstone that looked like something from a magazine, Imani felt her pride start to bristle. The building was beautiful, with clean stone steps and windows that actually had curtains instead of bedsheets thumbtacked to the frames. "This is temporary," she said firmly as they got out of the car. "Of course," Luca agreed. A woman in her 60s opened the front door before they'd even climbed the steps. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and the kind of warm eyes that reminded Imani of her grandmother. "Signora Rossi," Luca said, "these are our guests." "Welcome, welcome," the woman said, ushering them inside. "I have hot tea ready and fresh towels. You must be so cold." The inside of the house was even more impressive than the outside. Rich wood floors, comfortable furniture that looked both expensive and actually lived in, and the kind of warm lighting that made everything feel like a hug. "The blue room is prepared," Signora Rossi continued. "There are 2 beds, and the bathroom is private." "Thank you," Imani managed, "but we can't." "You can and you will," Luca said quietly, "at least for tonight." Nia was looking around with wide eyes, taking in the paintings on the walls and the thick rugs under their feet. When a small wheeze escaped her, Luca's attention immediately shifted to her. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Just the weather change," Imani answered quickly. "She'll be fine once she gets warm and uses her inhaler." Luca nodded, but didn't look away from Nia. There was something in his expression that Imani couldn't quite read. Concern, but also something deeper, something that looked almost like pain. Signora Rossi showed them to their room, which was bigger than Imani's entire bedroom at home. The beds had thick comforters and more pillows than 2 people could possibly need. A small sitting area by the window included a table set with tea service and what looked like homemade cookies. "I'll leave you to get settled," the older woman said kindly. "If you need anything at all, just press the button by the door." When they were alone, Nia sat heavily on one of the beds and pulled out her inhaler. "This is crazy," she said between puffs. "Who is that guy? And why does it feel like we're in some kind of movie?" Imani sat beside her sister and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I honestly don't know, baby girl, but he helped us tonight and I think we're safe here." "You think?" "I know." It surprised Imani how certain she sounded. "I can't explain it, but I trust him." They were quiet for a while, sipping tea and trying to process everything that had happened. When Nia finally fell asleep, curled up under the luxurious comforter like she'd been doing it her whole life, Imani found herself restless. She wandered into the hallway, drawn by the warm light coming from a room at the end of the hall. The door was open, revealing what looked like a study or office. Luca stood with his back to the door, looking out the window into the dark garden. On the desk behind him sat a small velvet box and a picture frame turned face down. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked without turning around. "Too much to think about," she admitted, hovering in the doorway. He finally faced her, and she was surprised by how tired he looked. The careful control was still there, but underneath it was something that looked like exhaustion. "Your sister seems like a good kid," he said. "She's the best kid, smart, funny, brave, even when she can't breathe properly." Imani's voice was fierce with protective love. "I'd do anything for her." "I can see that." Luca's eyes went to the velvet box on his desk. Family is everything. There was a story there, Imani could tell. Something in the way his hand almost reached for the box before he stopped himself. Something in the careful way he'd looked at Nia when she wheezed. But before she could ask, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Marco appeared, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he told Luca. Luca nodded and looked back at Imani. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps." As she walked back toward her room, she heard Marco's voice behind her, low and urgent. "The shot wasn't random. Someone knew your route, knew your timing. This was planned." Imani stopped walking. "And now she's involved," Marco continued, "whether she wanted to be or not." Luca's response was too quiet to hear, but the tone was clear, determined, protective. Back in the blue room, Imani lay in the dark listening to Nia's steady breathing and trying to understand what her life had become in the span of a few hours. This morning, her biggest worry had been whether she'd make enough in tips to pay the electric bill on time. Now she was lying in a stranger's house under his protection because someone had tried to hurt them both. The strangest part wasn't the fear, though that was definitely there. The strangest part was the way she'd felt when Luca put his coat around her shoulders. Safe, cared for, like someone was finally looking out for her instead of the other way around. She'd been taking care of herself and Nia since their parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. She'd gotten used to being the strong one, the responsible one, the one who had all the answers. But tonight, she didn't have any answers at all. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt almost like relief. Outside, rain continued to fall against the windows, but inside this warm, safe house, with Nia breathing easily beside her and Luca standing guard somewhere in the darkness, Imani finally felt her eyes growing heavy. Tomorrow would bring questions that needed answers. Tonight, she was going to sleep better than she had in months, even if she couldn't explain why. Morning light filtered through curtains that were softer than anything Imani had ever owned. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she heard Nia coughing in the next bed, and everything came rushing back. The wrong car, the broken window, the smell of gas in their hallway. Luca. "Morning, sleepyhead," Nia said, already dressed and sitting by the window. "Signora Rossi brought breakfast an hour ago. You were dead to the world." Imani sat up and rubbed her eyes. "What time is it?" "Almost 10. You missed your shift at the diner." Panic shot through her chest. "I have to call Rick. I can't just not show up. I need this job." "Already handled," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Luca stood there holding a steaming cup of coffee. He looked different in daylight, still intimidating but somehow more human. His dark hair was slightly mussed, and he'd traded the formal suit for dark jeans and a grey sweater that made his eyes look almost silver. "You called my work?" Imani asked. "Marco did. Told them you had a family emergency and would be in touch soon." He set the coffee on the table beside her bed. "Cream, no sugar. Signora Rossi noticed how you took your tea last night." The thoughtfulness of it caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had paid attention to something that small about her? "I can't miss work," she said, taking a sip. The coffee was perfect. "I have bills to pay, and my boss will replace me if I'm not reliable." "I understand that, but going back to your normal routine right now isn't safe." Nia looked between them with curious eyes. "Safe from what exactly? You guys keep talking around something, but nobody's telling me what's really going on." Luca glanced at Imani, asking permission with his eyes. She nodded slightly. "Someone targeted the car you got into last night," he said, sitting in the chair across from the beds. "They meant to hurt me, but you got caught in the middle. Now they know you exist, which means you're both at risk." "Targeted how?" Nia asked. She was smart enough to want real answers. "They shot at us," Imani said quietly. "The window broke because someone was trying to hurt Luca, and I was just there." Nia was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "So the gas leak at our building, probably not a coincidence," Luca confirmed. "Marco is checking into it." "This is insane," Nia said, but she didn't sound scared. If anything, she sounded fascinated. "Who are you that people are shooting at your car?" "Nia," Imani warned. "What?" "It's a fair question." Her sister looked directly at Luca. "Are you some kind of criminal?" A slight smile touched the corner of Luca's mouth. "I run a family business. Some people don't approve of our methods." "That's not really an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting right now," Imani said firmly. "The important thing is that he's keeping us safe." "For how long?" Nia asked. That was the question Imani had been afraid to ask. How long could they stay here? How long before she lost her job, her apartment, her carefully constructed life? "As long as it takes," Luca said simply. After breakfast, Luca insisted on taking her back to the diner. Not to work, but to talk to her boss and make sure she still had a job to return to. "I can handle this myself," Imani protested as Marco pulled the car up to the curb. "I'm sure you can handle most things yourself," Luca replied. "But today, you don't have to." Rick was behind the counter when they walked in, and his eyes went wide when he saw Luca. Not recognition exactly, but the kind of wariness that came from instinct. "Imani," Rick said carefully. "Everything okay?" "Family emergency, like I told you," she said. "But I wanted to make sure you know I'm not just disappearing. I'll be back as soon as I can." "Take all the time you need," Rick said quickly. Too quickly. His eyes kept darting to Luca, who hadn't said a word, but somehow filled the entire room with his presence. "Thank you," Imani said. "I really appreciate—" "It's fine," Rick interrupted. "Really, no problem at all." Outside, Imani turned to face Luca. "He's scared of you. He's being cautious. That's smart." "Why is it smart? What exactly do people think you'll do to them?" Luca was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "I protect what's mine. People know this about me." "I'm not yours," she said quietly. His eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker there, something that made her heart beat faster. "No," he agreed, "you're not." But the way he said it made her think he might want that to change. Back at the house, Signora Rossi had set up what looked like a mobile pharmacy on the kitchen table. Nebulizers, inhalers, medication bottles, and a small machine Imani didn't recognize. "What is all this?" she asked. "For the little one," Signora Rossi said warmly. Mr. Luca thought she might need better equipment for her breathing. Imani stared at the medical supplies. Some of it looked like the kind of thing insurance would never cover, the kind of thing she'd dreamed about being able to afford for Nia. "This is too much," she said. "It's practical," Luca corrected, walking into the kitchen. "She needs to breathe. This helps her breathe. We can't accept all this. We'll never be able to pay you back." "Who asked you to pay me back?" The question hung in the air between them. Imani felt her pride flare up, hot and defensive. She'd been taking care of herself and Nia for years. She didn't need charity from a stranger, no matter how kind he was being. "I pay my own way," she said firmly. "I respect that, but right now, your way isn't available, so we find a different way." "What does that mean?" Luca pulled a notebook from a drawer and set it on the counter. "You want to pay for things? We'll keep a ledger. Every meal, every night you stay here, every piece of medical equipment. You can pay me back when this is over." It was a compromise that saved her pride while still accepting his help. Smart. "Interest?" she asked. "No interest." "Why not? This is a business arrangement, right?" His mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "Because I don't need your money, Imani. I need you safe." The way he said her name made something warm unfurl in her chest, like he'd been practicing it, getting the feel of it on his tongue. That afternoon, while Nia worked on homework at the kitchen table, Imani found herself restless. She wasn't used to sitting still, wasn't used to being taken care of instead of doing the taking care of. "I need to do something," she announced. "Clean, cook, organize something. I can't just sit here." "The house is clean," Signora Rossi said gently. "Then I'll clean it again." Luca looked up from the newspaper he'd been reading. "You could help me with something." "What?" "I'm terrible at making omelets. Signora Rossi refuses to teach me anymore because I keep burning them." "You want me to teach you to cook eggs?" "I want you to feel useful while you're here. Teaching me not to burn breakfast seems like a fair trade." It was such a normal domestic thing to ask that it almost made her laugh. This man who commanded fear and respect from grown adults couldn't make eggs without supervision. "Okay," she said, "but I'm warning you, I'm not a patient teacher. I'll risk it." In the kitchen, she watched him crack eggs into a bowl with the same careful precision he seemed to bring to everything else. His hands were steady, graceful even, but there was something endearing about how seriously he took the simple task. "The trick is low heat," she explained, standing beside him at the stove. "Most people rush it." He nodded solemnly, like she was sharing state secrets. When he went to flip the omelette, his wrist turned wrong and half of it ended up folded over itself. "It's supposed to look like that," he said without missing a beat. "Sure it is." She bumped his shoulder with hers, a gesture so natural she didn't think about it until it was already done. He went very still. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean—" "It's fine." His voice was quiet, almost wondering. "It's been a long time since someone touched me like that." "Like what?" "Like I was just a person." The confession hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Imani found herself studying his profile as he stared down at the ruined omelette. Strong jaw, straight nose, but something almost lonely around his eyes. "You are just a person," she said softly. "Not to most people." Before she could respond, Nia's laughter rang out from the living room. They both turned toward the sound, and Imani saw something shift in Luca's expression, a softness that transformed his entire face. "She's happy," he said. "She hasn't been around this many people in a long time. Usually it's just us." "That must be hard. For both of you." Imani shrugged. "You do what you have to do." "Yes," he agreed quietly. "You do." That evening, after dinner and homework and Nia's evening medication routine, the house settled into quiet. Imani found herself drawn to the study where she'd seen Luca the night before. This time, the picture frame on the desk was right side up. A beautiful woman with long dark hair smiled out from the photo, holding a baby who couldn't have been more than 6 months old. Both of them had the same dark eyes as Luca. "My wife," he said from behind her. "Eleanor, and our daughter, Sophia." Imani turned to find him standing in the doorway, that same tired expression she'd seen the night before. "They're beautiful," she said. They were. He moved into the room and picked up the velvet box from the desk. "Car bomb. Meant for me. I was late coming home from a meeting. So Elena decided to take Sophia for a drive to pass the time. The simple, brutal facts hit Imani like a physical blow. How long ago? 10 years. He opened the box, revealing a simple gold wedding ring. I kept this, and I kept my promise to Elena. What promise? That I would never put another woman in that kind of danger. He looked up at her, his eyes dark with old pain. I haven't been with anyone since then. The confession was clearly difficult for him to make. Imani understood why he was telling her, though. She was living in his house, under his protection. She deserved to know what she was dealing with. But now, she asked quietly, now you're already in danger because of me, whether I want you to be or not. They stood there in the warm light of the study, the truth settling between them, attraction and fear, and something that felt dangerously like hope. Luca, she started to say. A sharp knock on the front door interrupted her. Marco's voice carried down the hall, urgent but controlled. Boss, we have a problem. Luca's entire demeanor shifted, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of authority. Stay here, he told Imani. But she followed anyway, staying in the shadows of the hallway. Marco stood at the front door, holding a single white lily and a piece of paper. Found this on the front step, he reported. No one saw who left it. Luca read the note and his jaw tightened. Get everyone inside, full lockdown. What does it say? Imani asked, stepping into the light. Luca looked at her for a long moment, then handed her the paper. The message was typed in simple block letters. Pretty flowers for a pretty lady. Shame if something happened to them both. Who would leave this? She whispered. Someone who wants me to know they can get close to you whenever they want, Luca said grimly. Marco was already on his phone, calling in additional security. Signora Rossi appeared to check all the windows and doors. The house transformed from a peaceful home into a fortress in a matter of minutes. This is because of me, Imani said. If I hadn't gotten in your car, if you hadn't gotten in my car, you'd be dead right now, Luca interrupted. The bomb in your building would have gone off whether you were there or not. What bomb? Her voice was barely a whisper. The gas leak wasn't a leak. Someone wanted to destroy your apartment with you in it. His eyes were fierce, protective. Getting in my car saved your life. Don't ever apologize for that. The full reality of her situation finally hit her. Someone wanted to hurt her, not because of anything she'd done, but because she'd accidentally become connected to Luca. What do we do now? She asked. Now we keep you safe, he said simply. Whatever it takes. That night, lying in the blue room while Nia slept peacefully beside her, Imani stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had changed in just 2 days. 48 hours ago, she'd been a waitress struggling to pay rent and keep her sister healthy. Now she was under the protection of a man who inspired fear and commanded loyalty, living in a house that felt like a palace, while someone out there wanted to hurt her. The strangest part was how safe she felt, despite the danger. With Luca standing guard, with Marco and his team watching the house, with Signora Rossi fussing over them like a grandmother, it was the most protected she'd ever felt in her life. And that scared her almost as much as the threat itself, because getting used to this kind of care, this kind of safety, this kind of life, that was dangerous too. What would happen when it was time to go back to her real world? What would happen if she didn't want to go back at all? Outside, she heard the quiet footsteps of security guards making their rounds. Inside, the house hummed with the kind of peace that came from knowing someone was watching over you. For the first time in 3 years, Imani fell asleep without worrying about tomorrow. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. A week passed in the strange safety of Luca's house. Imani found herself settling into a routine she'd never expected. Morning coffee with Signora Rossi, helping Nia with homework at the kitchen table, and cooking lessons with a man who commanded an empire but couldn't scramble an egg without her guidance. The omelette lessons had become a daily ritual. Every morning Luca would appear in the kitchen with the same serious expression he probably wore to business meetings, ready to battle breakfast. Remember, Imani said, standing close enough to guide his hands on the spatula, patience is everything. I'm not good at patience, he admitted, concentrating hard on not flipping too early. I've noticed. She smiled despite herself. But you're getting better. It was true, the omelettes were actually edible now, and more importantly, these quiet morning moments had become something she looked forward to, something that felt almost normal in the middle of their very abnormal situation. Manny? Nia called from the table where she was working on calculus homework. Can you help me with this problem? In a minute, baby girl, she replied, then realized what she'd just done. She'd made Nia wait. For years, Nia had always come first, always been the priority. But somehow in this kitchen, teaching Luca to cook, she'd found herself putting someone else's needs on equal ground with her sister's. The realization made her step back from the stove. I should help her, she said quickly. The eggs can wait, Luca agreed, but his eyes were thoughtful as he watched her retreat to the safety of being needed. Later that afternoon, Marco knocked on the front door with news that made everyone tense. The building inspector cleared your apartment, he told Imani. No gas leak, but we found evidence that someone had been inside. Inside our apartment? Imani felt cold despite the warm house. Drawers searched, but carefully. Nothing obviously missing. Whoever it was spent time looking for something specific. What would they want from us, she asked. We don't have anything valuable. Luca and Marco exchanged a look. They weren't looking for valuables, Luca said quietly. They were looking for information about you. Where you work, who you care about, what matters to you. Why? Because hurting the things you care about is more effective than hurting you directly. The cold feeling spread through her chest. Nia is safe, Luca said immediately. She doesn't leave this house without Marco or me, that's not negotiable. And me? You don't go anywhere alone either. Imani felt the walls of the beautiful house suddenly seem smaller. For how long? Until we find who's behind this? And if you don't find them? Luca's silence was answer enough. That evening, Imani found herself on the back patio, needing air and space to think. The house had a small garden that Signora Rossi tended with obvious love. Roses and herbs and vegetables grew in neat rows, creating a pocket of peace in the middle of the city. Can't sleep? Luca asked, stepping outside to join her. Can't stop thinking. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cool night air. This morning, I was teaching you to cook eggs like we were just normal people. Tonight I'm learning that someone broke into my home looking for ways to hurt me. Both things can be true. How do you live like this? How do you have normal moments when there's always danger lurking? Luca was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the garden. You learn to hold both things at the same time. The danger and the beauty. The fear and the joy. Otherwise the fear wins, and you stop living altogether. Is that what happened to you? After Elena and Sophia? For a while, yes. I stopped living. I just existed, went through the motions. He turned to look at her, until a stubborn waitress climbed into my car and reminded me what it felt like to want to protect someone again. The words hung between them, honest and raw. Imani felt her heart speed up. Luca, I know this is complicated, he said quickly. I know the timing is terrible and the situation is impossible, but I need you to know, having you here, watching you with Nia, teaching me to make breakfast like it matters, it's the most alive I've felt in 10 years. Before she could respond, the patio door slid open and Nia appeared, inhaler in hand. Sorry to interrupt, she said, though her eyes were bright with curiosity. Just needed some air. How are you breathing tonight? Luca asked immediately. Better, actually. That new machine you got makes a huge difference. Nia settled into one of the patio chairs. Thank you for that. For all of this, really. You don't need to thank me. Yeah, I do. Manny's been taking care of me by herself for 3 years. She never asks for help, never accepts it when it's offered. But you, Nia looked between them. You found a way to help without making her feel small about it. That's not easy to do. Luca's eyes found Imani's across the small space. Your sister is very wise. She gets it from our mom, Imani said softly. Mom always said that real strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about knowing when to let people help you carry the load. Smart woman. She would have liked you, Nia said suddenly. Mom always said the best men are the ones who make you feel stronger, not weaker. An awkward silence settled over them as Nia realized what she'd implied. I mean, she backtracked quickly, not that you guys are... I wasn't trying to... Oh God, I'm making this weird, aren't I? Luca laughed, a real laugh that transformed his whole face. Yes, you are, but it's okay. Weird can be good sometimes. Watching him laugh with her sister, seeing the easy way they'd begun to interact, Imani felt something shift inside her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. But hope, she'd learned, could be more dangerous than fear. The next morning brought unwelcome news. Marco appeared at breakfast with a tablet showing security footage from various cameras around the city. He's not hiding anymore, Marco reported, setting the device on the table. The footage showed a man in his late 30s with cold eyes and a smile that made Imani's skin crawl. He was sitting at a cafe directly across from the diner where she worked, openly watching the building. Dario Rossetti, Luca said, his voice flat with controlled anger. He's been quiet for months. I should have known he was planning something. Who is he? Imani asked. Someone who thinks hurting innocent people is an acceptable way to get my attention. Why does he want your attention? Because I put his brother in prison 5 years ago. He's been looking for a way to hurt me ever since. Imani stared at the image on the screen. This man wanted to hurt her and Nia because of something that had happened before they'd even met Luca. This is insane, she said. I don't understand how people live like this, how they think it's okay to hurt strangers just to make a point. Most people don't think like this, Luca assured her, but the ones who do are very dangerous. What do we do about him? We wait, Marco said. He's trying to draw you out, make you do something predictable. We don't give him what he wants. How long do we wait? As long as it takes, Luca repeated his familiar answer. But Imani was getting tired of that answer. That afternoon, while Nia was napping and Signora Rossi was at the market, Imani found herself alone in the house with Luca. He was in his study, going through papers that he quickly covered when she knocked on the open door. Sorry, she said. I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting anything important. She came into the room and sat in the chair across from his desk. This had become easier over the past week, being in his space, talking to him without the wall of formal politeness. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. Why did you help me that first night? You could have just let me out of the car and driven away. Why did you decide to protect someone you didn't even know? Luca leaned back in his chair, considering the question. Do you want the practical answer or the honest one? The honest one. Because you reminded me of her, Elena, not in how you look, but in how you held yourself when you were scared, brave even when you didn't understand what was happening. He paused. And because I saw how you looked when you talked about your sister, like she was your whole world. I knew what it felt like to have someone be your whole world. And the practical answer? Once you were in my car when the shooting started, you became my responsibility. I don't walk away from my responsibilities. Even when they complicate your life, especially then. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the afternoon sun casting warm patterns on the desk between them. I need to ask you something too, he said finally. Okay. When this is over, when Dario is no longer a threat and you're safe to go back to your life, what do you want to happen? The question caught her off guard. She'd been so focused on getting through each day that she hadn't really thought about what came after. I don't know, she admitted. A week ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life looked like. Work, pay bills, take care of Nia, hope for something better eventually. Now I've seen what it feels like to not carry everything alone. I've seen Nia laugh more in the past week than she has in months. I've felt... She stopped, afraid to finish the sentence. You felt what? Safe, she whispered. I've felt safe. Luca's eyes were intense on her face. You could keep feeling safe. What does that mean? It means this doesn't have to be temporary. You could stay, both of you. The offer hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. Stay how? She asked quietly. However you want. As my guest, as my friend, as... He stopped, running a hand through his dark hair. I'm not saying this right. Try again. He stood up and came around the desk, sitting on the edge so he was closer to her. I'm saying that somewhere between teaching me to make omelets and watching you read bedtime stories to your sister, I started imagining a different kind of life, one where I come home to voices in the kitchen and laughter in the halls, where I have a reason to learn how to cook breakfast properly. Luca, I know it's complicated. I know my world comes with dangers that your world doesn't. But I also know that I haven't felt this alive, this hopeful, in 10 years. Imani looked into his dark eyes and saw everything she was afraid to want reflected back at her. Security for Nia, someone to share the load, a man who looked at her like she was precious instead of just useful. What about Elena? She asked softly. Elena would want me to be happy. She'd want me to live instead of just existing. He reached out and touched her hand gently. And I think she'd like you very much. Before Imani could respond, the front door slammed open, and Marco's voice rang through the house, urgent and sharp. We have a problem. Everyone upstairs now. The moment of possibility shattered as reality crashed back in, because in Luca's world, happiness always came with a price, and someone was about to try to collect. The sound of Marco's urgent voice sent ice through Imani's veins. She followed Luca as he moved quickly toward the front of the house, his entire demeanor shifting from gentle to dangerous in seconds. What is it? Luca demanded. Marco was standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, and eyes scanning the street outside. Nia's school called the house number. She never made it to her tutoring session this afternoon. Imani's world tilted sideways. What do you mean she never made it? She left 2 hours ago with your driver. The driver never came back either. Marco's voice was grim. Car's been found abandoned 6 blocks from here. No, Imani whispered, then louder. No, no, no. This can't be happening. Luca caught her arms as her knees started to give way. We're going to find her. You promised she'd be safe. You said she was protected. She is protected. This isn't over. Marco ended his call and turned to face them. I've got every man we have looking for the car, but boss, he held up his phone. You need to see this. The text message was simple and terrifying. Trade the woman for the girl. Pier 47. 1 hour. Come alone, or she disappears forever. Imani snatched the phone from Marco's hand, staring at the words like she could change them by looking harder. Where's Pier 47? She asked. The old ferry warehouse district, Luca replied. About 20 minutes from here. Then let's go. No. Luca's voice was firm. This is exactly what he wants. I don't care what he wants. He has my sister. And if you walk into his trap, he'll have you both. Then what happens to Nia? Imani started pacing the small space, her mind racing. Everything in her screamed to run to that warehouse, to trade herself for Nia without thinking twice. But she forced herself to stop and consider what Luca was really saying. You have a plan, she said finally. I always have a plan. Marco was already moving, gathering equipment from a cabinet Imani hadn't known existed. Weapons, communication devices, and what looked like tactical gear emerged from the elegant living room furniture. How many men does Dario have with him? Luca asked. Surveillance shows at least 6, probably more inside the warehouse. And our people, 15, positioned around the entire district. But if you go in alone, like he's demanding, I'm not going alone. Luca looked at Imani with those dark, serious eyes. I'm going with backup he won't see coming. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, Luca pulled a small device from Marco's equipment bag. It looked like a piece of jewelry, a thin silver bracelet with what appeared to be a decorative charm. GPS tracker, he explained. Range of 2 miles, real-time location data. Understanding dawned on her. You want me to wear a wire. I want you to be smart about this. If we're going to trade you for Nia, we need to make sure we can find you both. You're going to let me go in there. I'm going to let you save your sister, but I'm also going to make sure I can save you both. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Imani would go to the warehouse as requested, wearing the tracker and a nearly invisible microphone. She would agree to the trade, but she would also stall for time, long enough for Luca's people to get into position. What if something goes wrong? She asked as Marco helped her with the equipment. Something always goes wrong, Luca replied. That's why we plan for everything. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to keep you alive. 20 minutes later, they were parked 3 blocks from the warehouse district. Imani could see the old ferry building in the distance, a hulking structure that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Remember, Luca said quietly, you're not trying to be a hero. You're buying time and staying alive until we can get you both out. What if he doesn't actually have her? What if this is just a trap? Then we find out where she really is and we make him tell us. The cold certainty in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it was exactly what she needed to hear. Luca, she said before getting out of the car, if something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. But if it does, promise me you'll take care of Nia. She has no one else. His eyes were fierce as he reached over and touched her face gently. I promise you that both of you are going home tonight. But Imani, yeah? When this is over, we're going to finish the conversation we started in my study. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Is that a threat or a promise? Both. The walk to the warehouse felt like the longest 3 blocks of her life. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every sound could be danger approaching. But she kept walking 1 foot in front of the other toward her sister. The warehouse door was open, as if they'd been expecting her. Inside, the space was cavernous and dark. Old ferry equipment cast strange shadows in the dim light, filtering through broken windows. And there, tied to a chair in the middle of the space, was Nia. Mani! Her sister called out, relief clear in her voice. Are you okay? I'm fine, baby girl, Imani replied, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Are you hurt? No, just scared. Well, a man stepped out from behind one of the old ferry engines. Dario Rossetti looked exactly like his photos. Cold eyes, cruel smile, and the kind of confidence that came from thinking he held all the cards. The famous woman who caught Luca Valente's attention. Let her go, Imani said simply. You wanted me. You have me. Oh, it's not that simple. Dario walked closer, and Imani could see two other men positioning themselves around the warehouse. See, I don't just want you. I want Luca to know that I can take anything he cares about, anytime I want. He doesn't care about me. We barely know each other. Dario laughed, a sound like broken glass. Is that what you think? Honey, he's had half his organization protecting you for over a week. Men like Luca Valente don't do that for strangers. What do you want? I want him to suffer the way I suffered when he destroyed my family. Dario's voice turned hard. And you're going to help me do that. Through the hidden microphone, Imani could hear the faint sound of movement outside the warehouse. Luca's people getting into position. She needed to keep Dario talking. Your brother, she said. Luca said he put him in prison. What did he do? What did he do? Dario's eyes flashed with anger. He tried to expand our business, and your precious Luca decided he didn't like the competition. That's not what I heard. Oh, really? What did you hear? Imani took a breath, hoping she wasn't about to make everything worse. I heard your brother was trafficking women. Girls, actually. Some of them younger than my sister. Dario's face darkened. Business is business. Not that kind of business. Never that kind of business. You don't understand how this world works. I understand enough. I understand that some lines shouldn't be crossed. You want to talk about lines? Dario pulled out a gun and pointed it casually in Nia's direction. Here's a line for you. Don't. Imani's voice was steady, despite the terror coursing through her. Your issue is with Luca, not with her. My issue is with anyone who gets in my way. That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. In that moment of confusion, Imani heard a sound like thunder as the warehouse doors exploded inward. Get down, Luca's voice commanded through the chaos. Imani dropped to the floor and crawled toward Nia as gunfire erupted around them. The noise was deafening, echoing off the metal walls like a symphony of violence, but it was over almost as quickly as it had started. When the shooting stopped and the regular lights came back on, Dario was on the ground with Marco standing over him. His men were either unconscious or surrendering to the tactical team that had appeared from nowhere, and Luca was running toward them. Are you hurt? He demanded, his hands moving over her face and arms, checking for injuries she didn't have. I'm fine. Check Nia. Luca quickly untied her sister, while Imani held her close, both of them shaking with relief and leftover adrenaline. How did you get in so fast? Imani asked. We've been in position since before you walked in the door, Marco explained. Thermal imaging, sound equipment, the works. We knew exactly where everyone was. And Dario. Won't be a problem anymore, Luca said grimly. He's going to spend the rest of his life in a very small room, thinking about the choices that brought him here. Later, back at the house, they sat in the living room while Signora Rossi fussed over all of them with hot tea and worried Italian phrases. Nia had fallen asleep curled up between Imani and Luca on the couch, exhausted from the day's events. Is it over? Imani asked quietly, not wanting to wake her sister. It's over, Luca confirmed. Dario's organization is finished, and anyone who might have wanted to continue his vendetta knows what happens when you threaten my family. Your family? He looked down at Nia, sleeping peacefully, then at Imani. If you'll have me. The offer was there again, hanging between them. But this time it felt different. This time, she'd seen what he would do to protect the people he cared about. This time, she'd felt what it was like to have someone fight for her, instead of always being the one doing the fighting. Luca, she said softly. I know what I'm asking, he said. I know my world is dangerous. I know it's not what you planned for your life. Actually, she interrupted, I think I stopped planning the night I got into your car by mistake. So what happens now? Imani looked around the warm, safe room, at Signora Rossi humming in the kitchen, at Marco reading a book in the corner chair, still close enough to protect them, but far enough away to give them privacy, at the man beside her who had turned his entire life upside down to keep her and Nia safe. Now, she said, reaching for his hand, I think we figure out what happens when the woman and the Mafia boss stop running from what they want. And what do we want? A life, she said simply, a real life, together. When Luca smiled, it transformed his entire face. Gone was the cold, controlled man she'd first met. In his place was someone who looked like he'd just been given everything he'd ever hoped for. I can work with that, he said. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. But inside the house that had become a haven, three people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances settled into the kind of peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. Months later, Imani would look back on that night as the moment her real life began. Not the life she'd planned or the life she'd thought she wanted, but the life that chose her. The life where she woke up every morning to the smell of perfectly cooked omelets, where Nia's laughter filled rooms that had been silent for too long, and where a man who had forgotten how to hope learned to dream again. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was infinitely better. And on quiet Sunday mornings, when Luca would slip Elena's ring into his pocket one final time before taking Imani's hand in the garden, she knew that sometimes the best things in life came from taking the wrong car at exactly the right moment. The end had become a beginning, and love, it turned out, was worth every risk they'd taken to find it.